I'm Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of this newsletter is going to be beaten down by life. Well, I've got an email here from a viewer who basically feels like that. He's in a job that's pretty much sucking ass, not making a lot of money. And so I've got a quote before we get into it that I'd like to share with you. If you really want to get to a place in life where your days are spent doing the things you really want to do and doing it with the kind of people you really want to do it with, you have to start somewhere. Follow your passion, curiosity, and intuition when trying to discover what your purpose in life is. It is wise to assume it will take decades to design and create the kind of life you've always wanted. Most people don't become an overnight success. Your path is your path. By having something emotionally compelling to strive for, your passion will keep you motivated to keep trying and adapting your approach even when it seems hopeless. So let's get into his email. He says, "Hey Coach, I have so much to say, yet I don't know how to say it. I'm so tired right now that I can't even think. I just quit my job at the Wildlife Conservation Society. I was hired to work at the Bronx Zoo as a district worker in maintenance. It's the fourth job that I've quit this year. This was a seasonal position that pays the minimum wage. The job involves maintaining an assigned area of the zoo, doing such things as garbage removal, weed whacking, lawn mowing, pruning, and other similar duties. It seemed like a job that had enough variety to keep me entertained. The bulk of the job, however, involves picking up trash on a specific route. This particular task eventually becomes dreadful, monotonous, and boring, not to mention exhausting, as I am on my feet for almost all of the day in sweltering heat with the sun relentlessly beating down on me. After a while, I felt like I was dying, and it was so boring I felt like I wanted to barf. My feet had blisters, bruises, and felt swollen all over. My legs felt like they had just run a marathon. How can anyone endure the monotony of doing this day after day is beyond me." That sounds like a really fun job. He says there are workers who are, this is really interesting what he shares here, because most people tend to major in minor things in life. People are just kind of dabbling their way. They get stuck in a rut trying to just eke out a living instead of trying to design a life. Because what I found in my own personal experience, like when I look back at my early 20s, like my late teenagers, early 20s, everything I went through, working a construction internship that eventually turned into a paying job. I was tending bar on the weekends. And on top of that, I was going to school, taking 12 hours a semester in order to get my Bachelor of Science in Construction Management. So I had a lot of things going on in my life where, I mean, initially the internship I was working was an unpaid internship. So there I am going and working 25, 30 hours a week initially for free. I wasn't earning a dime. And then we just got inundated with work after Hurricane Andrew hit. And so I was working, I went from nothing, from like working 20, 25 hours a week for free to 40 to 50 hours a week. And plus I was spending a couple hours. It took me like an hour and a half, 2 hours just to get all the way down from Fort Lauderdale to Cutler Ridge, because of course the state didn't want to close the toll plazas. They wanted to collect their money, and so it just backed things up for miles and miles because all the construction workers were commuting. And so what would normally take a 35, 40-minute drive down there often would take 2 hours down and then 2 hours back because I'd run into the fucking traffic going on the way back up, and it was a pain in the ass. And so I spent a lot of time just sitting in traffic and tending bar on the weekends and having bar rot on my hands. It was miserable, but what kept me going through that is knowing where I ultimately wanted to be, which was graduating, get my general contractor's license, eventually getting to the point where I could leave and start buying and fixing and selling houses. So when I look at that time and all I went through, it's like just grinding out day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. I mean, it took me a decade when I look at the time when I started out, from the time I was 18 until I made my first six-figure income, which was in 1998. So it was a decade in the making. Working a shitty part-time job, tending bar on the weekends, working an unpaid internship. And the average person doesn't really take the time to figure out what it is that they want to do, much less spend a decade getting there. And I also remember that a couple of years into my business that I had with my partners, I started another division of the company. And so I still had my income from buying, fixing, and selling properties, but I was taking most of that and pumping it into a new division of our business, which was general real estate, doing mortgages and just general real estate, taking listings, those kinds of things. And so I was making a decent income by myself, but I wanted to build a staff to where they would take care of the leads that were coming in, and then I could step back into more of a management role. It was kind of like the same thing all over again. And I mean, I remember it took a year to make it profitable to where it was basically breaking even. But it took from the time I started that division of our company to where I could back away from flipping foreclosure properties, it took 3 years to get to that point. And I just remember sitting in my office, just staring at the ceiling, staring at my computer, just going, God damn. It was just like month after month. I mean, you could see the curve going up, the income was going up, the revenue was going up. But to get to the point where there was enough revenue, I had enough staff trained, I had enough leads coming in from our advertising to where I could do that, it was 3 years. And so it's just, you got to really learn to practice infinite patience when you're doing that. Because for a lot of the time when it's like you feel like you're beating your head against the wall and you're working a lot, but you don't see the income coming in. And I mean, it's like when we started out, well, obviously our first month in business, my partners, I think we made $50,000 or $60,000 in profit. But we had learned that business model from another company. That, I mean, it took them 7 years to figure out that part of their business, and then we started doing, obviously, it on our own with my partners. We're making a significant profit. But, you know, I also, it's like the same thing. It's like, so you fast forward, after I got out of real estate and I became a full-time life coach, I spent the majority of what I was able to, when I liquidated my office building that I have my partners and my houses, and I got rid of my second car, got rid of the boats, jet skis, sold everything I had and downsized, because, I mean, my monthly nut, you know, when you go from making $500,000 a year to zero, and your expenses with your mortgages and everything are $20,000-$25,000 a month, and you got nothing coming in. I mean, you see, I walked away with basically $500,000, and I was chewing up my income quick, because we also, or what I had left, because the office building that we had, it was like, I think it was $17,000 a month mortgage on that, and that thing was just, it was 10,000 square foot office sitting there empty while we were waiting to sell it. And so it's just, you know, I was looking at that, and then when I got to the point where I was like, man, I think I had like $20,000-$25,000 left to my name, and then I was just thinking, this is ridiculous. And so my business was making money, my life coaching business was making money, but it wasn't enough to live off of, and so I needed another source of income, because I had some web designers that were working for me, and I needed money to turn for my pay-per-click campaigns, because I was testing different landing pages and stuff on my website. And so I was thinking, what can I do part-time? I could easily go and work a full-time job somewhere, but I wouldn't be able to keep my life coaching business, which I was doing during the day. So it was like the only thing left was either 10-bar or wait tables, and so I took, you know, a crappy job at a shitty sports bar, working like 3 nights a week and on the weekends, so I could use that money to pay my web developers for what they were doing for me, and also have money left over that I could experiment with on pay-per-click campaigns and testing things to figure out ultimately what became the successful business that I have today. But I think it was like 9-10 months I worked that job, and I just fucking hated it. I mean, can you imagine going from making $500,000 a year, having a fat $1 million house on a lake, voluntarily choosing to liquidate all of that stuff and downsize, and then getting to the point where a few years later, where here I am taking a part-time job, the kind of thing that like 20 years before I'd said, like, I'm never going to fucking work this kind of job again, and here I am. And I just, you know, I remember there was a sink where, like, we were walking to the double doors into the kitchen of this restaurant where I worked, and you go in there to wash your hands and stuff, and I just remember washing my hands, like, when I was doing it, is looking up, you know, at the ceiling where this plywood shelf was, and just, like, nowhere could see me, and I'm just going, oh, I can't fucking believe I'm doing this. I was like, I cannot believe that I chose to do this, to make some extra money, in order to do this business. And it was incredibly frustrating because, I mean, I figured that, it'll take me a year or two to figure out my business model. And it took twice as long as it took almost 4 years to figure that out. And it took way more money than I ever expected in order to figure out my business model. And sometimes that's when you have something you're passionate about and you know what you want to do, but I mean, you got to think in terms of decades when it comes to accomplishing really big, large goals. And since I had been through this process with my real estate mortgage company that I had, I knew it was a matter of time, but it's just when I looked at what it had taken the first time around to have the success, and then when the second time around when I started the new division of my business, it's just, that's the hard part, because you've experienced that great standard of living and that great lifestyle, and you voluntarily choose to change your life circumstances, and then, you know, a few years later you find you're working a shitty part-time job to make some extra money, and it's just very humbling, and it's frustrating as hell because you remember what it's like. You remember lifestyle, not being able to travel and do all those things like I once did, not eating out in the nice restaurants like I once did, buying the really nice clothes, buying the expensive cars, and having the boats and the jet skis, and being able to live that lifestyle. And it's like, you know, some of my friends were like, dude, you were fucking nuts to get out. Why would you get out of that business to go to do that? You know, to become a life coach, because that's where my heart was moving me. It was moving me in that direction. And so for me to stay doing what I was once doing before in the mortgage and real estate business was physically and emotionally painful and mentally painful to do it. It was torture. I personally really didn't feel like I had a choice, because I had, from the time I was 18, learned to start moving in the direction of what really felt passionate for me. And I was committed to that, and I believed in it. And like I said, when you're able to go back and look back upon that and you realize, I mean, you got to really, once you choose what it is that you want to do in life, you got to figure it's going to take you at least a decade or more, because not everybody's Mark Zuckerberg sitting in their jammies and coming up with the next Facebook where you become a billionaire in 2 to 3 years. I mean, as smart as I am, obviously, I ain't that smart, or I ain't that lucky. And so you got to think in terms of that. You can be optimistic and want to be successful quickly, but at the end of the day, for the majority of people, not everybody is the next Mark Zuckerberg. So back to this guy's email, he says, there are workers who are permanent, not just seasonal, and they've been working there for years, and I really don't know how they endure working there. Most, if not all of them, look like they've given up on themselves. They all have big beer bellies, some hanging over their belt. All of them smoke. Smoking and obesity is a deadly combination. Yeah, it's like, that's what people do. They drink themselves numb, or they smoke themselves numb in order to avoid the fact that they're so miserable and they don't really have an enjoyable existence. But at that point, they've given up. The average person's not willing to spend a decade or more of their life sucking ass or working crappy jobs just to earn enough income while they're building their business or their career on the side, or going to school in some cases, or going back to school when you're 30, 40, 50 years old. He says they all look old before their time, and it looks like they've all, this is really fascinating what he says here. He says, it looks like they've all resigned themselves to live this kind of life. It's like the average person has just given up. Most people are living lives of quiet desperation. He says you can see it by the way they look and act, that they've placed themselves on the conveyor belt of life and have resigned themselves to live this way. When you ask them what's new, their response is, same shit, different day. I don't want to end up like them. I don't want to give up on myself and end up looking like them. It's depressing. I don't want to give up on the things I love just so I can slave away at some tiresome, mediocre job that pays a minimum wage. I love taking care of myself, and I love the physical fitness lifestyle. I love lifting weights, running, and working out. And I hate the fact that I have to give up 8 hours of my precious time to do a job that I hate. Sometimes you just have to do that. But the worst thing is to be doing a job you hate and not knowing what you want to do or what you're meant to do, that just, you feel trapped when you're in that kind of a place. Like for me, I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew what it's like to enjoy a really great lifestyle, and then I voluntarily chose to downsize and reduce my standard of living so I could ultimately do what I'm doing today. And if you're willing to pay the price, if you're willing to gut it out for a decade or more or grind it out, you can get there. But that's why you got to choose something that you're passionate about, because unless you've chosen something that you're really passionate about and it's really emotionally compelling to you, when things get hard, you just give up. That's what the average person does. He says, it's just not the 8 hours I spend on a job, but also the time it takes for me to commute to work and back home. I started work at 8 a.m., but I needed to get up at 6 a.m. in order to give myself enough time to brush my teeth, eat breakfast, and get ready. It takes me a little over an hour to get to work and using the subway and bus. So counting the 8.5 hours I spent at this crummy job, plus the 2 hours I give myself every morning, makes 10.5 hours. Finally, I need to add the 1 hour commute it takes me to get home from work, which is a total of 11.5 hours of my 24-hour day that I have to give up. I get off work at 4:30 p.m. and I get home around 5:30. Between 5:30 and 10 p.m., I have 4.5 hours of freedom before I need to get to bed at 10 p.m. and get my 8 hours of sleep so I can get up at 6 a.m. the next day and repeat this vicious cycle all over again. So to add it up, I spent 8.5 hours a week plus 3 hours of time to get ready for work and to commute to and from work, which comes out to 11.5 hours of my day that I'm really giving my employer. I also spend 8 hours of my day sleeping, and that's 19.5 hours of my 24-hour day, which leaves me 4.5 hours of freedom in the evening after work. And when I get home from work around 5:30 p.m., I'm so physically and emotionally exhausted from this awful job that I don't have the energy or motivation to do my workout. That's kind of the way I felt when I was waiting tables part-time, because I'd come home, especially like during the season, I would work extra hours. I pick up extra shifts to make some extra money because it gave me more money to experiment with. And like, you're waiting tables, and I just, where I worked, the funny thing was when I worked in my 20s at a job waiting tables, it was a nice upscale restaurant, but I wanted to work someplace that was cool and fun, where I could meet some cool people. I had no fucking idea that this sports bar was as busy as it was. So like, I come home, I was dead fucking tired. And so I had stopped working out. I wasn't eating as healthy just because I was trying to conserve money. And that's when I got a skin cancer on my neck. And it was just because, I was so fucking frustrated at that time. And it was just, it's demoralizing, and it's really tough to motivate yourself to keep moving forward when you're in that place. And so I feel your pain. I know what it feels like. And, for me, because, the way I looked at it was that I had a lot of success financially and in business. And I think it's a lot harder to have had success and then to go through a period in your life where you're not able to live that kind of lifestyle, as opposed to never having experienced it. Because like when I was younger, I didn't know what I didn't know. He says, on this kind of schedule, I also feel rushed. I also have to look at the clock to see if I have enough time, because I have so little time for myself, because I have to give up such a good chunk of it to this stupid job. What all this does is it makes me feel rushed, and it creates a lot of stress, and after a while it makes me feel weighed down and tired. Whoever came up with the 8-hour, 40-hour work week schedule needs to be shot. I heard this system is really a relic from the industrial area. And I say that this no longer needs to apply in the world we're living in. And I don't think that we were meant to live on such a stressful and demanding schedule. And I think the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour is an absolute joke. Who the hell can live off that, especially in this expensive city? I live in New York City, by the way. And the only way you could live off that is if you lived in a cardboard box. Plus you got, not only do you have federal income taxes in New York, but you also have state income taxes. He says the only way you can live off that, he says, the only thing that's saving me right now are my Social Security disability benefits and the fact that I live in a public housing project where the rent is cheap enough for me to be able to afford it. Without that, I'd be homeless. I suffered a disability years ago which prevented me from working, and I don't want to be on disability for the rest of my life. My disability is improved enough for me to be able to work again, But the majority of the jobs that are these crap jobs where you have to give up so much of your time to work so hard, and in the end you end up working next to nothing. If I'm going to give up my disability benefits, it's going to be for a job that's worth it. I'm currently receiving $1,253 a month in disability benefits. That's the equivalent of somebody working a job earning $7.83 an hour, a little over the minimum wage. I just don't see the benefit for me to get disability just so I can work a crap job that pretty much pays the same. I can stay at home and continue receiving disability and get the same amount of money as if I worked one of those minimum wage jobs. I do have some schooling I studied for, passed and have acquired my network certifications. A job in IT would certainly pay well above the minimum wage, and it's a career that's well worth it for me to get off disability. The problem is that when I look for jobs over the internet or career websites, they all want experience. You can have a college education, you can have all the college education certifications in the world, but if you don't have the experience, then your education isn't worth a damn. And that's why I personally chose to work that unpaid internship when I was in college. But fortunately for me, it was only I think it was like 2 months, and then Hurricane Andrew hit, and then the general contractor I was working for was inundated with work, so they automatically hired me, and I got a full 40 hours a week. I think they put me on like 500 a week, I think it was, but still wasn't enough, and that's why I kept working my bartending job on the weekend. He says, I'm asking myself, how well can I gain experience if no one gives me a shot in the first place? And all those IT professionals who have experience started off like me with no experience. Someone gave them a chance, and so they were able to get their foot in the door to gain experience. It's a catch-22. I need a job to gain experience, but without it, I can't get the job. So I feel stuck between a rock and a hard place. You may have to look at working some kind of unpaid internship to get your foot in the door. And I've done many articles, how to get any job you want. If you Google Corey Wayne, how to get any job you want, and follow that method. Identify a job that you're not going to have to kill yourself on your feet, and identify some employers like I talk about in there, and then start targeting them. Because as an employer, you want to hire somebody that has a passion for your company and your job opportunity. And so that's the person that you need to become in order to get hired, because if there's a lot of people applying for your job, then the company has its choice of who they want to hire. And so the only way you're going to get hired is if you have enthusiasm and you really want to be there, almost as if you're kind of kicking the door down with your enthusiasm, and you continue to follow up month after month. Even if they don't have a job opportunity today when you apply, if you continue to follow up, the employer will respect that. They'll like the fact that, wow, this guy really wants to work here. So, I mean, if I were you, the best way that you can go about it is you got to figure out what it is that you want to do with your life. You got to choose something that you have a passion for, something that is emotionally compelling to you, the kind of thing that will get you up early in the morning. And even though the job might not pay a lot, the job itself, what you're actually doing for your 40 hours a week or whatever it is that you happen to work for them, is actually exciting and emotionally compelling, because it has a path that's going to lead you ultimately to where you want to be. And that's how I got through those shitty jobs in my early 20s, tending bar, and obviously in my late 30s when I worked a job for 10 months waiting tables. That's what kept me going, because I knew what it was like. I knew what it was like to really enjoy a great lifestyle, being able to buy the kind of house you want, and the kind of cars you want, and the kind of toys you want, and being able to decide, you know what, I'm going to go to Beverly Hills for the week or the next 2 weeks, and you go stay at the Beverly Wilshire with your buddies, and you fucking party like a rock star. I mean, it's fun being able to enjoy those things. So I knew what those things were like, and I knew I could get there eventually. It's just the hardest part is the not knowing, because you don't know whether it's going to take 2 years or 10 years. But because you're moving towards it, and that's something that's emotionally compelling, because, I mean, what's the alternative? You can give up and be like these other guys with the beer belly and that are smoking and they're drinking and that are miserable. But, you know, even if you have to work a crappy job like that, it's a means to an end. As long as you know what your purpose is, and as long as you have something that's really emotionally compelling and exciting for you, that's what will keep you moving forward. And so if you're in a place where you don't really know what your purpose is, you don't really know what it is that you want to do, you just know that where you're at right now really sucks and you'd love to get the fuck out of there, and you'd like to get my help personally, because I do a lot of work with people that are trying to figure out what their purpose is in life, and then once they figure that out, then I help them put together a plan that they can execute. Because it's like, as long as you got something to look forward to, as long as you have a goal and a dream to strive for that's emotionally compelling, that's what will carry you through those shitty days like I've described it, like where this particular guy has had and then I've had. So go to my website, click the products tab, which will be at the top of your screen, and book a paid phone coaching session with yours truly, or Google some of the articles I've written. If you Google Corey Wayne, how to discover your purpose, I've written a bunch of articles on this. But you got to do something, because I mean, think about it. You have to spend the moments of your life doing something, right? So wouldn't you rather spend the moments of your life doing something, even if it's something you hate for a while, knowing where you ultimately want to be? Because I mean, if think about it, if you don't know what your purpose is in life, and then you're working a shitty job, and you're looking at, what do you have to look forward to the rest of your life? Being miserable? Think about it. We'll talk to you soon.